What's happening, fishing friends? Today we're going to be covering a mistake that I've made for a while and so many other people are making these days, and that's no longer throwing the spinnerbait. Now, you may or may not follow professional bass fishing, but Jason Christie, if you've heard the name, he's one of the best shallow water fishermen out there, just took home the win on Santee Cooper in the NPFL for a $100,000 check. Now, you might think that's cool, but what's that have to do with your video, Debo? Well, he won that $100,000 on a Booyah Covert Spinnerbait. So today I want to do an in-depth look at the when, where, why, everything for spinnerbaits. It's been a confidence lure for me since I was young, but a lot of learning it came through trial and error. So today I want to help beginners, intermediate people, anybody out there wanting to get better at the spinnerbait with all that stuff. So let's talk about the when and where for spinnerbaits, and to do that, we're going to go out to the LureNet website. If you go under the Booyah Covert Spinnerbait series, they have an interactive map that shows you the blade types and when to use them. It's neat because when you click on these and you look at the chart, it shows the correlation between water temps and water clarity for what you're fishing and the best type of blades. And honestly, when it comes to blades, I get tons of question on this. And for a long time, I was very simple. I would just throw double willow or tandem, so a big willow and a little Colorado. I didn't get too adventurous, just always threw those, never really ventured out. And then as the years went by, I started messing with different blades, and I'm still not as super picky as some people out there, but this chart really helps break it down and kind of shows in the middle of a couple things that I throw and why. So let's take a look. First off, we're going to start out with the double willow blades. And if you look at the far left of this chart, it's clear, top to bottom, doesn't matter. We've got double willow blades all throughout. So these dual willow blades give you the least amount of thump, but it's a very natural vibration. This is actually the Finesse Covert series. So some of those smaller ponds or places that might see a bunch of spinnerbaits, sometimes downsizing to something like this. We'll talk about it more, but a little bit smaller blades. You could move up to something like this. This is a War Eagle. You can see how much bigger those willow blades are. They're going to give off a little bit more vibration. Willow blades are also going to give you the most amount of flash. They really have that kind of natural flutter to them. So not as much vibration. It's a natural sound. Some people say the willow blades mimic shad the best, but still give off a really good amount of flash. And I wanted to hit the blade size thing because people could say, well, a size 1 willow is not going to put off as much as a size 5 or 6 willow. I get it. But just in general speaking terms, a willow compared to the same size of some of these other ones, willow is going to give off the least amount of vibration. And you notice on that chart, on that far side, doesn't matter if it's cold or warm water, in that really clear water, willows are the way to go. Now that's going to kind of come into play more here when we start to look at the middle, but remember that. Really, really clear water, as a rule of thumb, willow. Now as you move to the right and the water starts to get dirtier, then the tandem blade spinner appears. So still gives you that big willow blade, but you've got that little kicker blade, just like you can see here, that's still a Colorado. So this is one that I made up myself. I took one off of a War Eagle spinnerbait here and threw it on. But the larger willow and then the smaller thump of that Colorado. So kind of the best of both worlds. Now, as we move over to the middle of the chart, we start to get some overlap, and here is kind of the point where the double Colorado blade is introduced. Now, the nice thing about these, when you look at that chart, it's in the middle of the chart all the way over to the right. So really those water temps in like 50 to 70. And the reason why is because this gives you a real good amount of thump. Earlier in the year, you're going to be slow rolling that spinnerbait. We're going to touch more on that, but slower rolling that spinnerbait. And these Colorado blades kick off a whole lot of thump to them. So dirtier water, starting to get to that, stained, all the way up to that really dirty water, Colorado blades. Again, thinking of that thump. Now let's go all the way over to the far right on this chart. So that super muddy water, really dirty water, and the big Colorado blade is king. So like I was just saying, that big thump, slow rolling the spinnerbait, especially when you've got that dirty water. Slow rolling this thing, it's just got a real loud boom, 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 boom. Real loud thump to it. It's easy to slow roll, depending on what you want to do with it, how high you want to keep it in the water column. We'll talk about that in just a second, but the most thump, and some people say that the larger Colorado blade actually mimics bluegill better. I don't know how true that is. Again, like I said, for the longest time, I threw double willow. It still caught tons of fish, but it is something I'm going to mess with more. And I was catching some fish last weekend on a spinnerbait. It wasn't the single Colorado, but on a spinnerbait. So I'm on my way to try to make spinnerbaits fun again and bring them back to you folks. Now you can see they do have different sizes. So this is one of those times I'll point out the single Colorado blade. This is, I think, a 4 and then like a 5 or 5.5, something like this. The larger the blade number, the bigger the blade gets. So it's easy to remember. Size 1 is smaller, size 5 is going to be bigger. But as you can see, the blade sizes here compared. So in that real cold, dirty water, that bigger blade, that big amount of thump, more fish drawing power, right? Fish can see with their eyes through that lateral line. They can feel the vibrations. So a lot of thump to help draw those fish over, help them locate it. Now when the water starts to warm up, you don't need as much of that thump. They're up feeding, especially once they get up there shallow. You know, you might not need to have that much thump. You're fishing, you know, maybe 3 foot of water, something like that. You can go to a smaller blade. It helps you move that bait faster. Again, fish are cold-blooded, so as the water warms up, their activity is going to warm up. So going to that smaller blade helps you move that baby quicker. The last two on here are the Indiana and then the Turtleback, the Oklahoma blade. Indiana, I was looking through, I don't even have any more Indianas. I used to buy some. It's essentially like taking a Colorado blade, a little round blade, and then taking the back of it and stretching it out. Kind of like a cross between the Indiana, it's like a cross between a Colorado and a willow blade, kind of an elongated Colorado. So it's kind of in between them. Now the one that I like, and I've been fishing for quite a while now, War Eagle has the little finesse ones. Do I have one? Ah, yeah, this one. This is the one that I had been throwing a ton of, but I noticed in the Booyah stuff, I picked up some of these when the bone color come out, because this bone color I think is really underrated. Very natural color, kind of a yellowish white. But this is the Oklahoma blade, or I always just call it a turtleback blade. It might have to be pounded or something like that, you know, hammered to actually be a turtleback. I don't know. I've always called them that, but this is kind of a good in-between. Good amount of thump, good amount of flash. It's got kind of this crease. Well, you can see it on the back, this like crease in the middle of the blade. So it looks neat when it flashes in the water. Kind of an in-between. To me, it's kind of that do-it-all in-between. And most of the time I'm fishing a spinnerbait, I'm not one of those guys that's throwing like a 3/4 ounce or an ounce one real early. And I know I'm missing out. That's why I've been trying to throw it more early. But usually for me, when the water's like, I don't know, starts to hit 55, 60, that's when I've usually always historically picked up the spinnerbait. Messing with something like this in that mid-range temperature, in that stained water, around here we have a lot of like, I don't know, 3-ish foot visibility, maybe 4 foot. So stained water, not super clear, but not completely muddy. And this has been a great one. Like I said, for a long time, I threw double willows still in that, or Colorado. So tandem, excuse me, with a little Colorado. So again, this is just kind of a rough way to reference the blades, because I think it's probably the most hard piece to pick out when you walk down the aisle of 100 spinnerbaits. What the heck blades do I want? Okay, now moving on to colors, this is really easy for me because it's gonna match most of the other stuff. So in the real clear water, I wanna go as natural as I can. So like a bone, matches crappie, wipers, you know, shad, of course, with your all white. Something really natural, and a lot of the translucent colors, you can play with these. This is one that I've liked. They call it sexy purple shad. Of course, figure I'd like some purple color. But it's like this translucent with a purple and a little bit of yellow, kind of like a threadfin shad to me. But these real translucent, real natural colors in the real clear water. Same for blade colors, silver in the real clean water. And as I get dirtier, I personally like gold blades. Again, feel free to play with what you want, but I've had better luck in dirtier water, gold blades. The cleaner, clearer the water, I just tend to go silver. Now in the stained water, this is where I like to add some color. So instead of going all white, you could go white and chartreuse. Now if you want, again, early spring, if you want a little bit of red in there, they've got some of these Booyahs with the dark red head or this orange head people absolutely swear by. Instead of having like the little red kicker blade, they'll go with something like this. You can start to introduce some other solid colors like an all red for early spring like this. I just caught, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 the other day on this when I was testing this versus another color, and I'm catching like 15, 20 fish. So the red definitely worked. Is it just a spring thing? I don't know. Then in that really dirty, muddy water, think of adding some solid colors to it. So like white, chartreuse, dark blue. This was one of the colors that Jason was throwing that day that he took the W on old Santee. Now I also had like a purple one, but depending on if you're night fishing, or some guys will swear by like a black and red, adding some sort of solid colors, black, purple, something to help make an outline in that really muddy water. Again, you can start to go with bigger blades. Just remember, the bigger blade, the more resistance you have, wants to pull that spinnerbait up. And as it's falling down when you first cast, it's going to take longer to get down there. So kind of a fine line between what you're looking to do, blade size, thump, all that. What about trailers? I get asked a lot about trailers, and I'm talking trailer plastics. And the plastics really do two things for you. Either number one, they're going to give you a little bit more meat to it and more thump, or two, they're going to give you more or less rise. So what do I mean? Well, how about a fluke style bait like this? This is one of the Hog Farmer spunk shads, or the missile bait spunk shads, some sort of straight tail deal like this. It's going to give you some bulk. You could also dip this, like if you had your chartreuse spike it, you could dip it to add a brighter color in there. It's going to add just a little bit of bulk to it to help with casting on those really windy days. gives a little bit bigger target for the fish to look at, but it's not really going to hinder the bait too much as far as up and down rise or how quick it falls. Straight tail like this, it's pretty much just going to go with it. You're still able to, you know, get this down, fish it quicker. It doesn't mess with that, doesn't add too much drag. Now on the other end, something with a lot of thump, some sort of paddle tail to it. This is like your Kitech. This is going to do two things. It's going to add more thump back here, so it's going to give off more vibration. It's going to make the bait fall slower, so if you're trying to get it down to the bottom, just remember it's going to have more of a flutter time. And as you start to reel it, the paddle tail is going to want to make that bait ride up more. So again, it's kind of a handoff depending on what you're looking to do. You can go to like a smaller tail paddle bait. You can even cut the tail down on it. Different things you can do to mess with it, but just remember, the straighter the tail, less thump, it's less impact on how shallow or deep it's going to go. Whereas if you add this, it's going to want to bring that bait up. It's going to fall slower. It's going to add more thump to it. Now the trailer hook on the back of it, I don't run them a ton because usually I'm running the spinnerbaits around a bunch of wood. Spinnerbaits do way better around wood. They're pretty weedless. With the spinnerbait, this wire in front kind of acts like a weed guard. As long as you keep it going and keep your rod tip up, this tends to come up and over stuff a lot better than the chatterbait that gets caught in it. So around wood and stuff, I don't go with the trailer hook because it's just one more thing to hang up. If I'm fishing grass edges or more open water and you get a lot of fish like rocky banks, riprap and stuff, I love to bang a spinnerbait off that. And that's when I will run a trailer hook if I'm getting a lot of bites or a lot of fish kind of swiping at it or coming up and boiling on it, but not super, you know, aggressive on it. Then I'll add a trailer hook to help with the hookup ratio. But normally if I'm around a bunch of stuff, I just leave the trailer hook off. Okay, so the combo, a couple things I'm thinking about. Depending on if I want really accurate casts, if I'm fishing around a bunch of wood, especially from the bank, I'm trying to get in and out of places, I'll go to a smaller rod. So kind of your typical shorter 6'10"-ish length, shorter rod, medium heavy, you know, nothing too crazy, regular fast. Some people like more of a moderate fast for moving, so it just depends on the rod, but I want to be accurate with it, so I want a shorter rod. So this one is a little bit faster than what I would normally like, 6'10", medium heavy, and it's an extra fast. I still got this one because it's not crazy bad. Like when you push it down, it's still got a pretty soft tip. To me, this is what I would call a fast. And if you want just a little bit of stretch in it, you can run like a mono or copolymer on here. This is some 15-pound big game I got to test out. Running that on here with just a little bit more stretch so the fish gets it, your rod starts to load up, and then you can set into that fish and set your hook. But something like this, short, it's really accurate. You can whip it around really easy. Now, if you want to go with something different, this is actually what I was using in the video that's coming up. So this is the Cashin core rod. Now this is the worm and jig, but you'll see from the specifications here, 7.3, medium heavy, fast, and most of these medium heavies are going to be rated up to like 3/4 or 1 ounce, kind of your typical medium heavy rod. A lot of times you don't need anything super special because one, you're going to feel that bite, and two, you don't want something crazy, super sensitive. You want that fish to inhale that spinnerbait, kind of get it, load up for a little bit, and then pull into it. You don't want to feel like that little pop and then pull it way away from it. So I don't think you need to go anything too crazy. You know, this is kind of middle of the road. For a long time I used, what was it? It was an old Lew's, I don't even remember what it was, you know, $100 rod. You can have success with moving baits without going super crazy, you know, on price. So both of these, I've really liked them. Like I said, fishing those riprap banks where you want a longer rod like this, where you can get a longer throw, grass lines, something like that, where you want a longer rod, gonna give you extra casting distance. So kind of two ways to go. If you've already got a 7-foot medium heavy fast rod, just use that. Now reels and a reel speed, guys and gals will fight you on this. I was using a 7-speed Tatula 80, small, fits in hand great. I've been messing with these, really like that reel. But a 7.1, I guess it's back here, I thought it was in the front. 7.1 speed. Some guys will argue because of the blades and there's so much resistance, you have to go to a 6. Some guys even go to a 5-speed. Reels have gotten so much better these days that I think a 7-speed is a perfect do-it-all, but a lot of guys like a 6-speed, especially when you get to those, you know, heavier ones, you know, slow roll in a Colorado, especially if you tend to reel fast. Going down to a slower speed helps you maintain, you know, that bottom contact going slow. So with that said, pick one that's comfortable for you. If you're really trying to slow down, you might want to go to a slower speed, but a 7-speed these days is still perfect. Now for line, it depends on how thick and gross of stuff you're fishing around. I know this says 8, I don't use 8. 15-pound P-line tactical is usually my starting point. I'm not fishing in crazy thick wood. You know, for a lot of the stuff around here is pretty sparse. 15 pounds, great overall. Casts extremely well, still strong enough. As that goes up into more wood, more stuff, you know, brush, bushy type stuff where it can get hung up, I'll go up to a 17-pound. You can even go 20 if you're in the super, super thick wood. Don't want to lose that fish. Don't be afraid to jump up a little bit. But 15-pound fluorocarbon's my go-to. You could always go to like a copolymer or a mono if you want a little bit more stretch. So, you know, like 15-pound. So some quick tips on the how and where. So again, in the beginning of the season, as the water's colder, just like anything, you're gonna move that bait slower. So creeping that spinnerbait, it might be down over like some rocks. It might be, you know, around some lay down wood. It could be over top of some dead vegetation, which is where I was fishing. And they wanted it right over it. If I wasn't ticking the tops of that stuff down there, they weren't eating it. A lot of the times once the water starts to warm up, which is how I was accustomed to fishing a spinnerbait, I'm reeling it within a foot or two of the surface, right? I'm burning that. I'm fishing it quicker. I'm throwing pops in there. More aggressive spinnerbait fishing. So let's talk wood. I don't really fish it in the super brushy stuff. That's usually where I tend to flip and pitch or move over to something like a swim jig that doesn't get hung up as much. But around like laydowns, big pieces of logs, standing timber, you know, timber that's just standing straight like this. Spinnerbait is awesome. Then it's just kind of figuring out how fast do I need to go and in what, you know, specific depth do I need to put that lure. There's been sometimes they want it within a foot of the top. There's sometimes where if I would just get it out of visibility line, so, you know, if I have 5 foot of visibility, getting it just down there about 6 foot, they were absolutely crushing it. So don't be afraid to mess with that, your depth, and then again, messing with your speed. Now, if you're not around a bunch of stuff for it to hit or react, like logs and stuff, as soon as I pull it over a log, I'll give it a couple quick pops and maybe a fast reel speed. So when it hits it and deflects and, you know, it looks like it's trying to get away, those fish, predatory instinct will tend to hammer it. If you're around places that don't have a lot of that, don't be afraid to pop some rod snaps in there and let that flutter, or be reeling it, give it a quick, and then let it flutter just a bit and then keep going. So throw those things in there to make those fish react. Now around grass. So normally I'm not gonna throw a spinnerbait around a lot of grassy stuff. That's where the chatterbait does do better. You know, both of these, you can fish them in a lot of similar situations. The two big things for me are wood, I'm going spinnerbait. Grass, vegetation, I'm going chatterbait. Now, the two things I will say is early in the year when you can stay above that. So if you have, you're fishing like 8 foot of water and the grass is coming up to 2 foot, you've still got 6 feet above that where you can just barely tick that grass and throw a spinnerbait perfect. Or along the edges of vegetation. So if you have really hard edge lines of vegetation where it might come out, if you're fishing from like a kayak or boat or something, you know, the vegetation might come out 30 feet from the bank, but then there's a hard line. It kind of stops where it starts to drop off. Fishing that just like you would a wall, throw it on the outside of that vegetation and bringing it across it. Otherwise, if it starts, you know, it's real sparse, you start to get more vegetation, I go over to the chatterbait. Now, one that I don't hear enough people talking about is rocks, riprap banks, just like you would throw a crankbait, exact same thing. One of my local lakes here absolutely crush them, used to crush them on that. Sometimes that's where they're at. So varying how close or how far you are from the bank can have a difference. And don't be afraid to let it hit some of those rocks and bounce off of them. Helps call fish in. It does, you know, different stuff to make them react. So that's my whole what, when, where behind the spinnerbait. I'm going to have more out on the water stuff, and I'm going to apply this stuff and talk to it and reference this video because I really wanted to focus on those blades, picking that, because that's the part where a bunch of people are like, I don't know what to throw. I just always throw this one. Picking that apart, again, using that diagram over LureNet, and if you pick up anything over there on the LureNet website, I do have my code DEBO15, saves you 15% off anything over there. Covert Spinnerbaits, War Eagles, you know, Booyah jigs, whatever you're gonna pick up over there, 15% off. But that map is really cool, and even if you don't fish those, I don't care where you're going or, you know, what brand you fish, Strike King or Nichols, whoever it is, doesn't matter. That chart is still a perfect way to help you pick out the blades that you want, no matter what brand or company you use. So let me know, comment below, have you been like me? Have you kind of locked the spinnerbait away and haven't fished it as much as you used to? I know, it's saddening, but I'm making more of an effort to throw the spinnerbait more this year instead of the chatterbait, which I think is a crutch for a lot of people, right? They just tie that on and throw it. So trying to experiment more, make the spinnerbait fun again for folks, but comment below and let me know, do you still throw it? Is there a specific one you like? Are you a turtleback fan like old Debo, or you just throw the double willows and say, I don't care? Now, today's subscribe fish friend is actually from Instagram, but it's Struggle Bus Fishing. And I thought this one was funny because he just commented on the red spinnerbait post I had on Instagram, but he said, couldn't get bit on anything except for a chatterbait. Listen, he catches some donks out there, so you can't argue it. Again, there's sometimes where the chatterbait and spinnerbait are, 51, half dozen the other, both will work. But hopefully this helps you pick out kind of when, where, all that behind the spinnerbaits. If you like these kind of breakdowns, let me know. I've got more videos I have planned, kind of picking apart a specific technique or lure, going in depth with how I do it. Again, my saying is I don't know everything, but I'm happy to share everything that I know. Try to help you out, cut that learning curve, because for a long time I struggled with this, and now we have, the YouTubes and such. So anyway, love y'all. I gotta get out of here and edit. Thanks for watching, and until next time.